Welcome to Breaking Sales, a podcast dedicated to helping you have tough, meaningful, and rewarding conversations with your prospects and clients. In meaningful, what we mean is these are the conversations you truly feel like you are the prospect or client's conversational peer. There's no anxiousness or uncertainty holding you back. You feel a sense of calm and confidence in asking the tough questions. You're not thrown off by the bad news, and you expect the prospect to think about and invest into the conversation as much as you do. On Breaking Sales, we use the filter of psychology and innate human behavior to deconstruct the many misleading sales approaches that actually work against your efforts to build trust and close the business. Let's get started. This is one of my favorite topics because of how it has impacted so many that we coach. Here's the question: which version of yourself do you bring into your conversations? The one that causes you to be consumed by the anxious anticipation of being accepted or liked, where you're distracted by the need to manage impressions and uncertain about what to ask or say? Or do you feel relaxed and free to ask the meaningful questions without having to substantiate why you're asking? And you're not worried about how you're coming across because you're fully in the moment. Now, I want you to think about how this plays out when the stakes get higher. How do you perform when your boss joins the meeting, when the deal just doubled in size, or a strong competitor has joined the process? Does hesitation, second-guessing yourself, and seeking validation kick in? It's tempting to blame nerves or a bad day, but there's something much more specific happening in your brain in those moments, and that's exactly what today's guest is here to talk about with us. Dr. Mark Leary is a social psychologist and neuroscientist at Duke University, who has spent his career studying what actually motivates human beings in social interactions. And today, he's going to help us understand why it can be so hard to bring our best selves to the conversation that matter the most. So let's get started. Well, Mark, listen, it's fantastic to have you on.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Thanks for joining. And the topics that you and I have talked about are just so relevant to today's performance in sales, or even leadership, or even in our personal lives and our personal relationships. Before we get started, though, could you share just a little background with our listeners?
Well, sure. My degree is in social psychology, which is the area of psychology that studies social interactions, social emotions, relationships, our interactions with our social worlds. And what I've been interested in mostly are two things, or the intersection of two things. One, social motivation. When we're interacting with other people, what's really motivating us? What are we trying to accomplish? What are we trying to do? And there's a variety of answers to that. And as we interact with other people, we often become rather focused on ourselves. We're thinking about what we want to do. We're thinking about what we're like. We're thinking about, what are these people thinking of me? So I'm interested in how self-awareness, thinking about ourselves, influences our motivations and allows us to either pursue our goals effectively, or sometimes it derails them. So I'm interested in social motivation and self-awareness.
When I think of social motivation and self-awareness, two dominant factors in how we have conversations, right? I mean, our expertise is conversation resilience within the sales spectrum and arena. But you could take everything you just said up in relationships, personal, leadership, all of that. And I do find that self-awareness, that is no given. I mean, I've heard the statistics that, and I joke sometimes, Mark, where if I have an audience of 500 people and I say, okay, who in the audience is self-aware? 498 hands go up.
Yes.
So maybe we just kind of jump in a little bit, just right on this idea of the the social motivation and the self-awareness, and we'll just start carving a path here.
Okay, well, let's start with making it really clear by what you and I mean by self-awareness. Our brain is processing information all the time, obviously. And most of that processing in our brain, we're not even conscious of. Like right now, I'm talking and I'm saying things, and it's not because I've thought about exactly what I'm going to say. It's just coming out. We can drive down the highway and change lanes and put on the brakes and get off on the exit without giving it any conscious thought. Most of our lives, the information that's being processed in our brains is really at a non-conscious level. It's happening automatically and we're not thinking about it. But sometimes we have conscious thoughts about things. We think very deliberately, well, which road should I take here? And I have to think about it. Or what kind of a bird is that? Or what's the weather going to be tomorrow? I'm thinking consciously. And some fraction of those conscious thoughts are about ourselves. And that's what self-awareness is. What should I do about this problem? Why did I mess this thing up? Hey, why am I so stupid sometimes? What do these people think about me? Those are conscious thoughts about ourselves. And we don't spend a lot of time doing that in comparison with all of the thoughts that we have. But when we do that, it has implications for our emotions and for how well we perform. So self-awareness are just simply conscious thoughts about ourselves.
So breaking that down a little bit. So you're saying that most of it is unconscious. So routine thinking, right? And that we're not even aware of it.
Yes.
Right. Our brain is like...
The output comes out. If you think about a lot of biases we have, or our reactions to things, or that look we get from somebody of disgust, we're not just consciously thinking about it a lot. We just automatically have a reaction to it. And then we might consciously wonder, well, what did I do to make them look at me that way? But so much of this is automatic. It's amazing to me that we can do so much on automatic. And if you think about it, yeah, maybe it's not surprising because all other animals are 100% automatic. They're not sitting there in the tree thinking, well, am I a good squirrel or a bad squirrel? What am I going to do the week after next? What's going to happen after I die? They don't think those things. They're on automatic all the time. Human beings have those kinds of self-thoughts.
Yeah, I kind of wonder, I've never really asked this of anybody, but why is that? Why are we wired like that, where we take so much energy and focus toward the social component of our lives and how we are seen, how we interact?
It was clearly a social adaptation, that it is beneficial at times to, for example, think about ourselves, to plan ahead. Again, other animals don't plan weeks and months and years ahead the way we do. That's beneficial. Thinking about what other people think of us can be beneficial. I'd like to know when I'm interacting with this person, how am I coming across? Do they like me, or should I get out of their face? What should I do? So it's certainly an adaptation. We wouldn't have human civilization without self-awareness. If you think about how we differ from all other animals and say, well, how come we're not living in nature the way all other animals are still living in nature the way they have for millions of years? Well, how did we create civilization? It was because of self-awareness. We could plan ahead to build that pyramid. We could think about what our goals were going to be. We decide, well, we think we ought to do some science here. Let's do some studies. Let's get a government together. Let's have philosophy. You can't do those things without self-reflection. So the thing that makes us different from all other animals is really this capacity for self-awareness.
I'm going to ask a question, and I may use the wrong terms, so please correct me. Does self-esteem impact self-awareness? Because I know there are times that our self-awareness doesn't always work in our favor. It works against us, right? Where if I'm in a meeting, and you and I have talked about this, and there's a question I want to ask, and I know it's a good one, it's meaningful, but it might be tough and it might cause a little tension. My self-awareness is going to kick in on that.
Yes.
Let's kind of talk that through. Is self-esteem, does it affect self-awareness, or is there something else that's affecting that moment of self-awareness?
All right. Let me sort of split this into two questions. One is sort of the self-awareness part, and then we can come back to the self-esteem part. If we think about the times in which we are self-aware, And that's a good example you have there. When the stakes are high and I'm really trying to figure out what I should do, what I should say, something is on the table here and I've got to do it right, self-awareness will kick in many cases. The problem with that is it often interferes with what our actual goal is at the time. And the metaphor I like to use is sort of a sports metaphor because it applies even to non-sports settings. Okay, I'm a basketball player and I'm shooting a free throw. The game is close. The game's near the end. This is an automatic thing that I can normally do just fine. But when I get to the line and I start to shoot, my self-awareness kicks in. Oh my God, I got to make this thing. I'll think about it, Mark. Take a breath. Oh, move over this way. And the self-awareness is about two things there. And this is the case in the meeting example you had. Some of my self-awareness is how do I achieve the goal? So I'm I'm shooting a basketball, and I can do this automatically without thinking. But now I'm thinking, oh, breathe deeply, keep your shoulders back, whatever it is. I'm thinking about the goal, but I'm also thinking about the social repercussions of failing to meet the goal. Oh my God, if I miss this thing, I mean, I'm playing in front of the fans. What are they going to think? Are they going to write me up in the newspaper tomorrow? So I've got thoughts that are completely irrelevant to shooting the basketball. I'm thinking about the social consequences. The same thing happens in a meeting, a business meeting or a sales meeting. I have a goal, and the higher the stakes, the more I'm going to think consciously about what should I say? Ooh, what did that person's glance mean? Should I take it this way or that way? If the stakes aren't quite so high, it just comes rolling out. If I'm an experienced speaker or experienced salesperson, I can kind of do this naturally. You raise the stakes, and I begin to think, how do I do this? And then I start thinking about the social repercussions of not doing it well. Oh my God, what if I blow this sale? Does this guy think I'm an idiot? What are they going to say at work if I don't get this sale? So now I've got two things going on in my head. I'm thinking consciously about a goal that maybe I don't need to be thinking about because it's kind of automatic. And I'm thinking about the social repercussions of it. And that's natural in a way. We want to think deeply about the things we're working on. And we should be concerned about what other people think up to a point. We don't want to lose our job over this thing. But that kind of conscious thought can interfere with the smoothness of our reaction. It can lead us to be inhibited, as you suggested. Oh, maybe I shouldn't say this thing, or I'm weighing, should I say it? Should I bring it up or not? And I'm struggling with it. But it also just kind of freezes me, and it gets just too many things going on in my head. We can only think of one thing at a time, really. So we've got to jump around from one topic to another. And if I get stuck on these things, I'm not thinking about what I ought to be thinking about. Whether I'm shooting a basketball or I'm having a sales meeting, my thoughts are locked up by my self-awareness.
You know, it's so true. I mean, you know, I think of golf, right? I like to play golf, and you watch these PGA Tour players, and it's a 2-foot putt that they make 9 out of 10 times. But then there's that one time they don't make it. And to your exact example, we got to think about what was their thought process? What were the things they were thinking about so that they weren't able to actually perform that automatic putt in the moment?
Yes, absolutely. There were some really interesting studies a number of years ago by a researcher named Roy Baumeister, where they went to video arcades. And they would stand back and they'd watch somebody playing video games in a video arcade. And so they could see how good this person was and keep track of their score. And then to go up and tap him on the shoulder and say, would you mind if we watch you play this video game? And everybody crashed. Everybody played worse knowing they were being watched by these strangers. And that's exactly what you're describing.
You know what makes me think of is the many times rising up, right, in the industry or in the career of sales. And I would bring my boss, or I bring my boss's boss, or even my boss's boss's boss. And I'd be in front of a prospect with one of them. And you're right. I'd always leave there going, man, that wasn't me. That wasn't as smooth as I normally am. Or what happened? And right. And then you have that other meeting a day later, and there's nobody else in the meeting with you, and you're performing. It's
absolutely. And where I have that is a lot in public speaking. I hope that there's nobody in the audience that I know, because that's so much more pressure. A lot of strangers, I don't want to look stupid in front of a bunch of strangers, but I certainly don't want to look like an idiot in front of my friends or my family or my kids or something. So I'd rather talk to a bunch of strangers for the same reason you're talking about.
So I do want to get to the self-esteem component. I have it down, but here's an interesting question on that. I have a lot of clients that vary in this. Some of our clients will say, hey, Dan, I'd rather be selling someone I know because I feel like I can ask them any question. I feel like I can be very candid with them. And I don't feel the hesitation or the uncertainty in that moment, in that conversation with them. But then I have another group of professionals who will actually say the opposite. They'll say, I feel 10 times better with a stranger.
Yes.
I feel better that I can ask whatever I need to ask. And I feel very detached from what they're thinking or how they're thinking about me. It's funny how I see, like, it's almost like the polar opposite. Depends on who they are.
All of these processes differ across people. And some of my research have looked at the personality differences and the motivational differences that make different people react differently to these contexts. Let me just mention two things that sort of could be in play there. There's a personality construct called dispositional self-consciousness. Some people are just naturally more likely to think about themselves than other people are. So you can take 100 people, put them in a room, and do things that would normally make people self-conscious, and some people respond to that a lot more than someone else does. So it could be that the one group who is expressing more self-consciousness, and I don't want to talk to people that I know, they could just be so high in self-consciousness that extra person they know being present just pushes them over the edge of being too self-aware. If your self-consciousness is pretty low, maybe that doesn't bother you quite as much. The other thing that dawns on me, it sounds like the first group who would rather talk to people that they know, or the group that talk to people they know, some people are more bothered by the uncertainty of not knowing how this person's going to respond. The more I know about you, maybe the more I can fashion my questions and my sales pitch to you. And so that's an advantage. But the downside is if I look like an idiot, then it's somebody I know and I have to see you again tomorrow. And I know that you thought I looked like an idiot. So there's a balance there.
Yeah. So that first group, are you saying that there's some kind of safety there where their interpretation of the interaction, it's fine because they have there's some kind of safety there because
Yes.
they know the person.
That's a good point.
And so they're okay making a mistake. They're okay risking looking silly because they already established in their head there's some safety.
Yes, that sounds right.
But what about that second group who says the opposite, where they're like, you know what, Dan, I don't want to talk to people I know. It's harder for me. I actually feel like it's much easier talking to people that I don't.
Yes. And I just think those people just think the risk, maybe they're more concerned about their image in the eyes of the people they know. Maybe it's more uncertain. Maybe I think the people I know, I don't know what they think of me exactly. Maybe it's not as positive. I don't want to undermine however they view me by botching up this particular interaction.
So I'll use myself as a guinea pig here. I am in the second group. When I don't know someone, I am much more relaxed in a business conversation, that is. I am tuned in. I don't have too many secondary or whatever you want to call it, thoughts or whatever. But in the first group, I don't think I know I struggle. So what's probably going on in my head? At least in theory.
Well, in theory, I mean, who knows? Again,
Right.
we're speculating here.
Yeah.
But I think in some ways you're more concerned about what the people who know you well, or that you know well, think about you than the average stranger. So there's an interest and concern with making a good impression on those people. And that's not surprising. I mean, I want to make a bigger statement here. You know, so much, you hear people say, I don't care what people think. We shouldn't care what people think about us. My parents tried to say that. Don't worry about what people think. March to your own drummer, be yourself, and let them take it or leave it. That's horrible advice to give a kid. Think of the world if nobody cared what anybody else thought, what it would look like and smell like, and how people would behave, because our concern with what other people think helps keep our behavior in line, because we have to maintain these connections with other people. And if they think I'm rude or immoral or incompetent or whatever it happens to be, I'm not going to have good relationships with people. The problem is we become too concerned. We overdo it. So there's an optimal space in there where Being concerned with your impressions that you make on other people is absolutely critical to social success. Well, in sales success, I think any salesperson says, I don't care what this client thinks of me. I mean, they're not going to sell anything. That's not going to work. But it has to be the right amount. It can't go overboard where I'm just so self-conscious, I'm paralyzed, I'm nervous, I'm not being forthright with them, I'm not being courageous. So many things in social life, there's that happy middle ground.
You said something really, really, really well, really good there, which is there's a middle ground.
Yes.
As you know, we teach a flavor, a process, or not a process, a ideology or whatever you want to call it, of detachment, which is don't go into a conversation business-wise or in sales trying to drive an outcome and only focusing on the outcome, and try to compartmentalize how that person thinks about you. Don't get wrapped up in it. But at the same time, don't go to the point where you're irreverent.
Yes. Yeah.
And you come off like you don't care at all.
That's right. That's exactly it. That's beautifully said. There is an optimal sweet spot there. I can't walk into a situation where I don't care at all. We couldn't even get a job. I hear people say, well, I don't care what anybody thinks of me. I'll say, well, how do you have a job? Because clearly you had to be concerned with the job interviewer. So there's a happy medium. We did research at one point on the people who say, I don't care what other people think. It doesn't affect how I view myself. It doesn't affect my self-esteem. That is not true. We had a large sample and we picked the extremes. The top 15% of the people who said, yes, I'm really concerned with what other people think of me, and the bottom 15% who says, I'm never concerned with what other people think. And they were indistinguishable in their reactions to getting negative feedback. So that means the people at the bottom who said, I don't care, they really did care.
Is that, again, there might be multiple reasons for them to say that, right? Protective mode, right? Who knows what's happened in their life, so they have this shield up or whatever, right? But is that's also some self-awareness too, or lack thereof in that case?
I would think so. Now, maybe some of them it's true. If you take a sociopath, for example, they don't care very much what other people think of them. They just do what they want. And if it offends you, they don't really care. But I think most of these people have been raised in a culture that says that there's weakness involved in being concerned with what other people think of you. You know, you're kind of weak, and you pander to other people, and you're a pushover, and they don't want to feel that that's what they are. But again, there's a happy medium.
If this conversation is hitting close to home, you might also want to check out episode 46, The Power of Being in the Moment, where we talk more about what it takes to perform in high-pressure conversations. You brought up a phrase a couple minutes back, and I see this, I hear this, I observe this a lot. People pleasing. In sales, that can be really cumbersome. That can be a big roadblock, because a lot of times the person knows, hey, I want to ask this question, or I need to call this prospect out or client out on this, or I don't think what the prospect or client just shared is actually in their best interest. But because they're people pleasers, they hold back. Sometimes I'm not even too sure they're aware of what their motivations are and how those motivations are even showing up in their conversations. Can we dive into that people pleasing?
Yes, certainly you can be so concerned with making sure people like you, that you don't say anything offensive, that you don't push the envelope, that it's going to make you less effective socially. There are times when you really do need to stand your ground and be assertive, and be nice about it. That's not just in sales. That's in your friendships, in your work relationships, in your romantic relationships. Again, it's a happy medium. Yes, I have to be nice. I need to please my wife and make her happy with me, on a daily basis. But you also have to stand up when you feel like you've got to say something as well. And the other thing you said, I think, is really important. They don't recognize their motivations. But I want to say, I think that's true of all of us. All of us are responding in the way that feels natural to us and normal. And we're not thinking about why. This is just the way I am, and this is the way I should respond to you right now. And other people might look at me and say, well, no, that you shouldn't have done it that way. There would have been better ways to do it. So we all get locked into our own modes of motivation.
Yeah. I've not done any research on this yet. The term metacognition. When I say that, what comes to mind?
It's thinking about your thoughts. They're thoughts about the thoughts that you're having.
Is that a very skilled level of self-awareness, or is that completely different?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think whether it's skilled or not depends on whether in a particular situation it's functional. Because some of the thoughts you have about your thoughts, it's very functional to think about it. I've done research on a topic called intellectual humility, which is simply recognizing that whatever you may believe could potentially not be true. We all believe things that are not true. We've made wrong decisions in the past. And so intellectual humility is stopping and thinking about your thoughts and saying, well, I know I think this, but is there any chance that this idea or this decision or this belief is wrong? And that's usually pretty functional because you're double checking to make sure that you're not biased in some way. But there are other times when you can evaluate your thoughts and think about them too much and you just lie awake at night. How come I'm thinking about this stuff? Why can't I stop my thoughts? Well, where am I going with this? So metacognition can really mire you, focus on your thoughts, particularly ones that you don't like. So whether it's skilled or not, I think depends on whether it's useful at the time.
Which would beg me to ask, it would influence or whatever me to ask is metacognition maybe something that we could strengthen, develop?
In certain areas, yes. I mean, there are courses out there on critical thinking, for example. Well, critical thinking is basically metacognition. How do I think about my thoughts and figure out which thoughts are critical and useful and come up with the best evidence and the best decisions? So yes, no, it's something that's trainable to some extent. The thing we do have to remember about our thoughts is, in an odd sense, we are not personally thinking them in many cases. They are being thought automatically, which freaks me out. My brain thinks without my permission. I mean, for God's sake, it's my brain. Why can't I control it? But I'm not sometimes. It's just thinking, and I tell it to stop, and it keeps going. And when I think about it that way, it's almost spooky how much of our behavior, our thoughts, and our emotions, our personality is really out of our control. We've got an organ in our head that's doing a lot of this work, and we don't have any control over part of it.
So that makes me think of this example, all right? In sales, as you would expect, there's this need to be fairly good, consistent at outreach, which is prospecting, which is reaching out to people you don't know, right? To try to establish new relationships. Yep. It's that risk component of, I need to send this email, introduce myself, hopefully they're going to respond. Or it's picking up the phone saying the same thing, I'm going to introduce myself, hopefully they accept my call and they're open maybe to a conversation, right? There's a social risk there that we take that's innate, right? Now, in that moment, here's what I know is happening to every single salesperson out there. Their brain, and it's interesting you said, right? It's almost like our brain isn't us. It's just thinking for us in a way. The brain has an immediate response to that activity, which is create doubt, create a narrative of doubt. Are you sure you want to make that call? What if they don't respond? Or what if they're rude? What if they hang up on you? So the brain immediately, before you even take the action, right, it's sending a narrative of doubt in hopes that it causes you to pull back and come back to the world of safety.
You nailed it. Yes, there's an automatic bias. And again, that's probably evolved in the sense that we're overly threat sensitive, that all animals react to things that aren't really all that dangerous as if they're scary. You think of a deer in the woods, and how many times during the day does it startle just because a twig cracked and it runs through the woods? Well, we're kind of like that. That leads us to try to avoid the really dangerous social situations that are going to create threats and negative outcomes for us. So we have a pessimism bias in some ways, that we assume that things are going to turn out badly, and that cautions us either to completely withdraw and say, well, I'm not going to make this call, I'm not going to do this thing, or at least to think about it deeply so we do it as carefully as we can and be prepared for the risk that's involved. But you're absolutely right. Yeah, we're primed to lean toward negative interpretations of things.
Can a process consistently practiced, like cognitive reframe, help?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the basis of an awful lot of psychotherapy. I mean, I'm not a clinical psychologist or a counseling psychologist, but so much of counseling and psychotherapy is getting people to change their patterns of thinking, because the client has some dysfunctional thoughts that's creating bad outcomes, emotional outcomes or behavioral outcomes, and so the therapist helps them sort of develop new, entrenched, habitual kinds of thoughts. That applies to all of us. You don't have to have clinical problems. All of us have patterns of thoughts that are not as beneficial as they could be, and they can be trained to some extent. You can't train them completely because, again, the brain's not completely in our control, but we can develop new habits. It's almost like developing a behavioral habit. I'm going to try to not eat as much sugar. Well, you can control that to some extent, but it's not going to be 100%. Same thing with your thoughts. You can affect them somewhat, but not perfectly.
Yeah, none of us are going to, I like what you just said, none of us are going to be perfect. But we can work at it so that there are times where we are able to maybe move off of the negative thought into a different thought before we decide on taking that action, whatever the action is.
Yes. We could either do that, and that's the best thing, but we can also learn how to persist in something despite the negative thoughts. To understand that, no situation, very few situations are completely perfect. There's always a potential downside, but sometimes that inhibits us, but sometimes we can override it. We can say, okay, I just got to let that go. Yes, this may not turn out well, but if you think about things not turning out well enough, you won't get up off the couch in your living room. I mean, you're not even going to walk outside. A car might hit me or something. So you've got to be able to persist in spite of whatever the negative thoughts are.
Say that again. I like that. The idea of persisting.
Even with negative thoughts.
Even with negative thoughts.
It's a challenge because we're primed not to do that. We're designed, so if you got negative thoughts, you better be careful because there's some threat out there that's going to undermine your outcomes in life. But successful people know how to persist. Think about cases of stage fright. Because a lot of what you're talking about in sales and the anxiety and the nervousness and the self-consciousness, it's not all that different than somebody getting up on stage to perform or to give a talk and having stage fright. Well, even very accomplished speakers still get nervous. I could bomb out in front of this audience. And they may throw things and throw me out of here before I'm done. Highly unlikely, but it's there. So even successful speakers, and presumably successful people in sales, know this could go badly. They're not completely relaxed in some situations, but they still persist. They can still do it. And that's an important ability.
Yeah, I'm going to ask a question on it. I have to. Is persistence nurture or nature?
It's a combination of both. Almost everything is. If you look at the genetic basis of most of these tendencies, whether you're talking about persistence or confidence or extroversion or social anxiety, when they do the genetic studies and look at twins versus non-twins and all of that, you always find that there's a good chunk of the variability in people that in fact does have to do with how our brains are wired. We're sensitive to different things. But it's also nurture. You can also teach people to do these things better, to persist more, to show them the rewards associated with persistence.
So a lot of the things we're talking about, right, whether it's the persistence piece, right, whether it's a little bit of cognitive reframe of trying to go from the negative thought to a more positive thought, right, before you decide on taking action, things like that, it's learned. You can invest and you can learn.
Absolutely.
Right. But it's never about being perfect.
Never. And that may be one of the most important lessons, is to learn that no matter what you do, no matter who you are, you're never going to be perfect. Not every situation is going to turn out ideally the way you would like it to be. That's just life. And that's a hard thing for all of us to accept. We'd love for our lives to be perfect. One thing I sort of taught my kids at one point, they would come home from school. Oh, I had a terrible day today. All these things happened. And I said, well, how much of the day was real? I had a terrible day. I say, how much was the day was really bad? Well, this and this happened. I said, well, that wasn't the whole day. And so I had discussions with them that I learned from in terms of saying how much of something has to be good for it to be acceptable. What percentage, for example? And, people set different percentages depending upon sort of their successes in the past. But I started thinking, if 80% of my day turns out basically okay, I had a pretty good day. I can't really expect much more than that. Now and then you may have a 100% day, but not very often.
That's our negative bias kicking in, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
If we have 20 interactions with another human being and 19 of them are very good, but one is not, we tend to focus on the one.
Absolutely. And all college professors that I talk to tell me, and I've had this experience, you get into the course evaluations, you had 60 kids in class, and everybody loved it except one or two, and you go home and say, well, what happened there? Why didn't those people like it?
Yeah. So really interesting. Now I want to get back to a little bit of the self-esteem. And I know that this is a deep topic in general. So, but when you think of sales, when you think of leadership, right? Things like that, you think about some of the topics that we've talked about already today, how would you say self-esteem plays a role?
Well, self-esteem has been a really messy construct in the psychological and behavioral sciences. And in fact, I avoided it like the plague for the first 15 years of my career. Almost everything I studied, people would say, well, how's self-esteem related? And it would be related, but I didn't know how to think about self-esteem. And there were a couple of things that puzzled me. So let me sort of clarify how I think about self-esteem, then I can answer your question. I was puzzled. They say, well, you should always have high self-esteem. We want everybody to feel good about themselves. And if you don't feel good about yourself a lot, that's kind of a problem. And in fact, people have a need for self-esteem. A lot of things were explained in the research literature. Well, people do this because they need self-esteem. And I thought, well, yes, it's better to feel good about yourself than bad. We all prefer that. But why would that be something that we need in some important way? And what's really going on here? I just didn't know what to do with it. But then after a number of years, I was doing research on interpersonal rejection. And what we started finding in our studies is that self-esteem at the moment, would fluctuate with the degree to which we felt accepted and valued by other people. When you feel accepted by other people, you feel good, and you feel good about yourself. Your self-esteem soars.
Especially in sales too, right?
Yes.
I mean, you get the appointment, your self-esteem soars. You get the second appointment, it soars. You get the deal, it soars.
Yeah, absolutely. And if any of those fall through, you feel badly about yourself, at least temporarily. And even in just looking at people's other behaviors, the things that make people feel good about themselves are all things that increase their value in other people's eyes. And the things that make people feel badly about themselves, doing illegal things, dishonest things, being unethical, lowers their self-esteem. But those are also the kinds of things that lower your image in other people's eyes. So what we finally concluded was that self-esteem, changes in self-esteem as we go through each of our days, is a gauge. It's a monitor. It's a meter that's giving us feedback about the degree to which we are being valued and accepted versus devalued and rejected by other people. And we called this the sociometer. Just a cool little name I made up in the shower one day. It's a meter that measures our social relationships. And the reason it was so confusing for years, I think, is that psychologists were looking at a gauge of social acceptance, and they thought it was the real thing. It was the gauge. Sort of like if you didn't know what a fuel gauge in a car was, if you didn't know why people put gas in their car, and you say, well, I can see why, it's giving you a higher level of F, and you need some F. Well, no, F is just full on your gas tank, on your gas gauge, and the gauge doesn't matter. It's what's in the tank. So I think these feelings of self-esteem we have is a monitor. It happens automatically. If you nod your head and smile at me and act like I know what I'm talking about, oh, I have a little bit of burst of self-esteem. If you go, what the heck are you saying? Then my self-esteem sinks. So if you look at it that way, self-esteem is simply a monitor. And it in itself doesn't really do much. It motivates us. So when our self-esteem sinks, it motivates us to look at, well, why is that? Did I do something? I got to think about why I did that. Or is it just this other person and they're having a problem or they don't like me? So it causes us to analyze our behavior. Now, high self-esteem is associated with good things, but it's associated with good things like high grades, high performance in the job, not because self-esteem makes us have high grades or perform better at work, but because having high grades or performing better at work raises our social acceptance and our value and makes us feel better about ourselves. So I don't think self-esteem has a causal influence in here. We want to feel good rather than bad, but that's just the monitor that's keeping us apprised of how well we're doing. What's more important is what I would think of as self-confidence. Or self-confidence, self-esteem's, do I feel good or bad about myself? It's just an emotional
But you're basing self-esteem, we all do, more so on the external interaction of what we're getting in return, the value of what we're getting in return.
Or what we think we would get if other people knew it. Because I can do something privately today that nobody knows about and feel really good about it, but it's the kind of thing that if somebody did know about it, it would raise.
So what you're saying right now, our innate, I wouldn't say mine, but I would say our society's innate need for social media is based on self-esteem.
To the sense that it's making me feel better. I'm trying to feel better about myself.
Well, I'm just saying because everybody posts stuff. They post this. Everybody wants the likes. Everybody wants the comments. Everybody wants it to go viral. I want you to see how cool this was. I want you to see what I'm doing in this moment, right?
Yes. And so I'm motivated to feel good about myself. There's no question. But the fundamental thing is I'm motivated to be valued as a social interactant. And again, that's the important thing in life. You know, we get a lot more positive outcomes from our friends, acquaintances, our coworkers, our neighbors, even total strangers, to the extent that they value interacting with us. That's where the values of social life come in. And if they don't value us, nobody's going to have anything to do with us, or we'll be lost and alone somewhere, and that's not going to work. So
we'll go back to self-confidence now. So what's that difference?
Yeah, so self-confidence is, your judgment of the probability that you can accomplish something, that you can accomplish your goals. High self-confidence is, I think it's a high probability. Low self-confidence is it's a low probability. So it is important in many cases to believe that you can accomplish something or you're not going to even try it. Now, it's possible to have self-confidence that's too high, that's irrational. If I had confidence I could become a world-class ballerina, and I was confident of that, there'd be something wrong with me, so that's not good. So it's good to have some confidence. And in sales, you want to have the confidence that in the long run, I'm going to be able to sell some of whatever service or product I'm selling in the long run. In this particular situation, I don't know. It's unknown. This person may not want to buy. But if I was a salesperson who had low self-confidence across the board, I'm never going to be able to do that. Well, first I'll quit probably, but I'm not going to be very effective walking into those situations already deflated and pretty sure I'm not going to be able to make the sale.
I got a question on self-esteem again.
Okay, sure.
Is there a point where it works against us because we are too focused on the outside factors of how we see ourselves and how we value ourselves? And is it healthy if we can catch those moments sometimes and pull back from them?
That is a great question. And the answer is yes. Let me give an extreme example. Why do people join street gangs and commit crimes? To be accepted. I mean, the research on it shows it's a need for belonging. I don't feel accepted by other people, so I'm going to join a street gang, and I am accepted if I go help rob people. And I'm going to feel good about myself, that I'm a successful member of this street gang. So it's leading me to engage in a behavior that's illegal, dangerous, not good for me either, and it's being fed by my desire for acceptance and to feel good by myself. So we sometimes all do things in an effort to be accepted that probably aren't beneficial. And in that case, it absolutely can work against us.
How about something as simple as the people pleaser analogy, where the people pleaser knows they've got to ask the question, they've got to make the comment, or they got to make the observation because it's going to benefit the other person, but they get so tied up in what they want in terms of being liked, being accepted, that they hold back.
Yeah, no, that's a really good example. Yes. I want to be accepted. I want to feel good about myself. And in that context, being a people pleaser actually works against my goals of making the sale or being persuasive. Absolutely true. And I think that does inhibit all of us from doing hard things, firing the employee. I just keep them on because I don't want everybody to dislike me for firing somebody. There's a lot of things we probably should do, but we're concerned about their social implications for us, so we don't. And that's a downside of it. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, so much what we talked about today plays out 24/7 within the sales construct of you have the sales professional who's engaging the buyer or the prospect, and right, the sales professional's trying to guide the prospect into should you make a change or not make a change.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds simple, I know. And for many years and decades, it's been considered simple, right? The art of persuasion, etc. But if you really think about it, every topic that you and I have talked about today plays out constantly within those conversations or interactions.
That's a great observation. It's almost like it sounds like in the past, nobody considered the fact that salespeople are human beings.
or prospects, or like salespeople. I think salespeople sometimes forget that the prospect's a human being.
All right. Yeah. And when you do that, you ignore what the people's real motives are, what their real concerns are, that this is a social creature trying to sell this product or service, and they're susceptible to all of the influences that we experience in all the rest of our lives in interactions and social relationships.
And wrapping up, is there anything that you'd like to add, Mark?
No, I think you've asked a line of questions that are fascinating. I've never thought of them playing out in the sales arena, and I see it. I think you're right on target.
That's why we wanted you on. I mean, the things that you've researched and you've studied and you've written about, that's what makes up sales.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'd never thought of that in all these years.
I love it. Well, it's been great having you on.
I appreciate the invitation. I certainly enjoyed it. Thanks so much.
All right, Mark. Talk to you soon.
Mm-hmm. Bye-bye.
I really enjoyed what Mark and I got into today. The difference in how you perform when the stakes are low versus how you perform when they're high is something many of us have experienced. But recognizing the pattern is not the same as understanding what's causing it or being able to catch it in real time as it's happening. And that's what actually puts you in a position to do something about it. So as you're going into your next high-stakes conversation, pay attention to what's happening in your mind. Is your brain sending you a threat narrative with the intent of causing you doubt and weakening your performance? Or are you able to self-regulate in the moment and shift your focus away from how you feel and back toward what's best for the other person? This is where improving your conversational stature and results begin. One more thing, if this podcast is useful to you, don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcast or Spotify, and subscribe to our YouTube channel if that's where you listen. It makes a real difference in helping us grow. Thanks for joining us today.